Now to a very mysterious story in Canberra. A top public servant, the long-time Secretary of the Home Affairs Department, Mike Pezzullo, has been somehow caught sending many WhatsApp messages, how was that intercepted, to a Liberal Party power broker, Scott Briggs, when Briggs was the key confidant of then Prime Minister Scott Morrison. These were texts which Pezzullo offered political advice and damning assessments of Liberal ministers who should be sacked, who should be appointed, who should be what. Here's some of what's screened on 60 Minutes last night about this.
If Dutton is out, give me Taylor or Tudge. You need a right-winger in there. People smugglers will be watching.
Agree.
Please feed that in.
Will do.
Brandis's behaviour's getting worse.
Okay, I fed that into the PM. I think things may be getting closer to a Brandis departure.
George seems to be trying to negotiate a stay of execution. If that were to occur, he would have to change his mindset and behaviours about home affairs. He is in complete denial.
Now, I've got to say that Pezzullo's political judgments were pretty good. I mean, he told Briggs, for instance, that Senator Payne was completely ineffectual as Defence Minister, tick, and he almost had a heart attack, he said, when former Foreign Minister Julie Bishop, a real lightweight, was considering a tilt to become Prime Minister. But Anthony Albanese today said Pezzullo had been told to stand aside while there's an inquiry into him, and I don't think he'll be back. Joining me is the country's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of The Australian. Greg Sheridan, thank you so much for joining me. You would have had a bit to deal with Mike Pezzullo when he was first Secretary of the Immigration Department, then Home Affairs, particularly with the national security roles as well that involves. What do you make of these texts and the man himself?
Well, Andrew, a couple of very important things to note here. So I haven't read all the texts and I don't know exactly what they disclose, but there's plainly been a concerted campaign to get Pezzullo for some time. He plainly has very powerful enemies. According to the story, many of these text messages were on the encrypted service of WhatsApp and also, I think, Signal. And I thought it was pretty hard to decrypt Signal. So somebody very powerful with very good technology is out to get Pezzullo. That ought to tell you something. The other thing is that, these texts, I don't know what's in them, so they may justify Pezzullo going, but this will be a tragedy if Pezzullo goes in many ways because he gets more done before morning tea than the rest of the public service gets done in a year. And, I campaigned for a long time that he should have come back to Defence as the Secretary of the Defence Department. We may not be in the strategically naked, defenceless position we're in right now. I mean, he is a dedicated Australian who cares profoundly about our national security and, unlike almost everyone else in Canberra, actually comes to work every day and tries to make things happen. And so I'm not making any judgment about the texts, but I think we'll be a poorer nation if Pezzullo is blotted out of leadership. And again, I'd raise the question what the motivation has been to get Pezzullo over these recent months.
Well, I think there's a lot of what you say there. I mean, I have to say, Greg, as I said earlier, his political judgment seems pretty good, nearly fainting to think that Julie Bishop had the qualities to become Prime Minister and saying that Marise Payne was hopeless in defence. Absolutely true. I wonder whether I'm hearing people saying cross the line by giving political advice as to which ministers should go where, but maybe we're just being naive. I mean, maybe that's what a good secretary does. I don't know.
Well, one thing, of course, is that it's clear now that there is no realm of privacy in modern life. So you're not allowed to have... So I'm not giving Mike a blanket exemption from everything revealed in these texts because I haven't seen them all. But it seems that you're not allowed to have a private conversation. As you say, Andrew, Marise Payne was an astonishingly ineffectual Defence Minister. She's one of the reasons we're in such a mess right now, although I wouldn't single her out. There are other ineffective Defence Ministers too. But do you think that Pezzullo was the only person in Canberra to make this observation in a private conversation with a friend? But now you can be in deep trouble for things you say in private conversation which are not offensive or cross the line or illegal or anything like that, but which simply, cast judgments on people that you're entitled to make judgments about. Now, I'm not offering a blanket exemption for Mike here or anything like that, but a lot of these things which are most titillating to the public are just private conversations. And I tell you what, if I had $1 for everybody in Canberra who told me Marise Payne was an ineffective defence minister, I'd be a wealthy man.
Yeah, there's a matter of a contract that he issued without going to tender to a company linked to Briggs, but I don't know. It seemed a bit tenuous to me, and I share your concern. Who's trying to get Pezzullo and for what really? Greg, something very alarming. China's dictator has just made a deal with the president of one of our closest neighbours, Timor-Leste or East Timor. How worrying is this?
Look, I think this is a bad development, Andrew. China is trying to get into every pore of the South Pacific, and our intelligence agencies believe it wants a military base in the South Pacific eventually. We're in a poor position to criticise Timor-Leste because under the previous coalition government, for reasons that are completely indecipherable, we ourselves embarked on a comprehensive strategic partnership with China. So if we go to Timor-Leste and say, don't you guys dare get into a comprehensive strategic partnership with China, they can say to us, well, how come it's okay for you and no good for us? But nonetheless, the successful effort of Beijing to gain influence, gain security agreements, gain presence all through the South Pacific, and to inject a lot of money in very dodgy aid projects and in other payments, which are extremely irregular, all through the South Pacific, is a very big problem for Australia. And if China ever does establish a military base somewhere in the South Pacific, that would be utterly catastrophic for Australia.
And with President Gusmao's left-wing past, there's a little worry about simpatico there. I find it interesting, Greg, when China made a deal with the Solomon Islands, this was a huge scandal. Scott Morrison asleep at the wheel. When this happens with East Timor, which is even closer, suddenly there's nothing to see here, folks. Just quickly, in the US, astonishing news, a new Washington Post and ABC poll says Donald Trump is now way ahead of President Biden in a presidential matchup, 10 points behind. I mean, the Washington Post can hardly believe it. It warns that this poll is probably an outlier. Don't panic, don't panic. Can Donald Trump really be so far ahead of Joe Biden?
Well, Andrew, even if the poll is an outlier, all the polls have been showing a dead heat between Trump and Biden, and a few of them have been showing Trump a little bit ahead. So even if this overstates things, Biden has every chance of losing to Trump. Now, this is slightly twisted reasoning, but I think if Biden fears he will lose, that will encourage him to get out. I think Biden will be really scared that he and his family will be prosecuted over the Hunter Biden scandals, and his best safety for that is a Democrat victory. He'd like to be the guy himself, obviously, but if Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or Pete Buttigieg or someone is the president, they're certainly not going to prosecute Joe Biden. And I think this really is a come to Jesus moment, if I can speak a little blasphemously, for the Democrats, because it shows just what a bad president Biden is and how vulnerable he is. And I think this will be causing conniptions and panic across the Democratic Party. Biden wants to run, but it's becoming, I think, more and more untenable as each day goes by.